Hello everybody. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about Nicki Minaj's recent song and record-breaking music video, Anaconda, because it's definitely made a lot of headlines. It's been controversial. It's been something that not only feminists have been talking about, but people in the media in general. Everyone has been talking about this music video and what it means and what it's saying about gender and sexuality. And I wanted to give you my perspective on it. Before I get into it, I want you to keep in mind that this is coming from the perspective of me, who is a white woman, who's someone who has white privilege. And I think that's important to say going into this, especially with Nicki Minaj being a black woman who made this video. So I just wanted to kind of say that and acknowledge my white privilege before getting into this. So first, I want to talk a little bit about Anaconda as a parody. A lot of people, especially a lot of feminists, have talked about this sort of being a parody for the way that women's bodies are sexualized, for the way specifically that black women's bodies have been sexualized, and sort of the racialized sexism that they experience in hip-hop and in music videos in general. Like, for example, like Taylor Swift's recent Shake It Off music video, that would be a good example of cultural appropriation and racism against black women. And a lot of people have been saying this is kind of Nicki Minaj's sort of parody. This is like her response in doing something that is supposed to kind of be ridiculous in order to make a political statement about racialized sexism, black women's bodies and how they're treated. And I think this is a really interesting perspective. It's not something that actually occurred to me as I was watching the video. I wasn't thinking that it was a parody. But after reading some articles and seeing some other people's perspectives, I can understand how you could perceive it that way, or how it could definitely fall into that category of being a parody. With that being said, I'm not sure if her intention was to make it a parody. She said in interviews that she wants to keep everyone guessing and doesn't necessarily want to do something that's transparent. So I think that was kind of the point, was to get people talking about this and having these conversations. She wasn't necessarily trying to make a super direct statement. It's somewhat left up to interpretation, if that makes sense. And as a parody, I think it definitely, like, assuming it's a parody, it makes some really strong statements and really shows a lot of the racism and sexism that black women and women of color, but specifically I would say black women, experience because of the way that their bodies are. Nicki Minaj, in interviews about this, has talked about how the trend in hip-hop and media has gone from, like, loving a curvier, appreciating a curvier body, to now kind of going back to the skinny, thin is in trend. By the way, sorry if you hear, like, construction or something. They're doing something out in my dorm room hallway. I don't know what. But sorry about that. Anyway, so she's kind of talked about that and how this was sort of her, like, statement saying that, like, that's bullshit. And I can totally see how this could reflect that in a parody form, of, you know, like, doing it to a really extreme level in order to show that, you know, the body image standards, and specifically the Eurocentric beauty standards that our society holds, are really ridiculous. And not only are they ridiculous, but they are oppressing women of color. And I can totally see that, and I think that if she was trying specifically to make a parody, and kind of show this ludicrousness, she definitely did a really great job. Next point I want to talk about is Anaconda as a feminist statement. There's also been a lot of chatter about this, as Anaconda being a statement that, you know, women's bodies are their own to do as they please with, that male objectification of women and just like sexualization of women's bodies in general is bullshit, and this is kind of a proclamation against that. That Nicki Minaj is reclaiming Black women's bodies, and specifically the way that Black women's bodies often look, as, Black women's bodies often are curvier. That's just the way that it is, and kind of showing the beauty of that, and, saying to all of these kind of like Eurocentric standards of beauty and what women are supposed to look like, is just complete bullshit. Kind of going back to the parody, so sort of a similar statement then of talking about cultural appropriation, racialized sexism, and all of this stuff. And again, I can definitely see a really great argument being made here for Anaconda being a feminist statement, or kind of being rooted in feminist philosophy or praxis. What I would say as a counterpoint, though, is that Anaconda, while it can be seen as kind of taking back the power from objectifiers, from the patriarchy, it still kind of does reinforce women as being sex objects, in my opinion. Because even though this is Nicki Minaj, a Black woman, doing the objectifying, making this statement, she's still ultimately, in my opinion, objectifying women and turning them into sex objects. Like, if you see how she treats and interacts with the women in her videos. It's definitely not clear enough as a parody, I don't think, to be explicitly seen by a viewer as being that, as being a display of the ridiculousness in our culture. So I could see a lot of people perceiving it as the same sexualization and objectification that we see everywhere else in media. And I think that's definitely a problem. And it kind of too goes back to, I think, like, do we need, one more kind of like sexualized objectification-y piece of media out there? Because it definitely, I think, still sort of does fall into that realm, even though the power dynamics are a little bit different, since this is, like I said, a woman of color who is making this, who is doing this. It's a little bit different than, like, if a white man was doing this. So the power dynamics have shifted, and it makes it a little bit different. But at the same time, is it still objectifying? Is it still sexualizing women's bodies? Is it still placing them into this narrow box of you have to be sexy? And even, that you have to have a certain type of body, because not all Black women have, like, big butts, or have a, super curvaceous look, or have the curvaceous look that she specifically is going after, which is, still thin, but having, like, big breasts and a big butt, but everything else is thin. I think that you could also, look into the body image dynamics and principles going on within this video. Because we don't see, like, a range of body types. We see one sort of Black woman, and I think the question is, could there have been more diversity, and how would you have showing all kinds of Black women with all different types of bodies, how could that have changed the representation and changed the narrative from being something that's based in holding one particular type of body over all other types of bodies? Because I think you could definitely still kind of go against this Eurocentric idea of what women are supposed to look like, and, like, show the diversity of specifically Black women or women of color's bodies, and, like, really amplify the beauty that exists within them, and even, like, the uniqueness and, the difference in those bodies from more like white Eurocentric bodies, and kind of display the beauty and the difference that exists there, and, like, how that should be highlighted. I think that's definitely something that could have been done, and I would have liked to seen that as well. So, it can, I think, be interpreted as feminist, but I do think there are still some problematic dynamics and things happening within the video that you could say are not probably very feminist. The other major point to talk about with objectification is Sir Mix-a-Lot's part in this music video, because he's the person with an anaconda. Since sort of the main point of the song is that he only likes women who have big butts, and those are the only types of women that he will have sex with, you could still really argue that this video and this message is still coming from the male gaze and the male point of view when it comes to women's bodies, because it's someone dictating and saying, I only like this type of body, who is a man, and then sort of the other things in the music video and the objectification and stuff sort of comes as a response to him, so it's like, is it really shifting the power dynamics? And is the objectification even really different when there's still like a man who's involved and really kind of at the center of this song? Which I think is another interesting question to ponder when we talk about this video. That then leads me to Anaconda's representation of women. Obviously, I think this is a song made for Black women and made for women of color, and made also, I would say, for women whose bodies like fall outside of the Eurocentric standard. Because I think in the song, Minaj herself says like this is for women like who have fat asses or something like that. So I think she's specifically targeting women who fall outside of what society considers to be beautiful. And I do think that, like I said, there is power in that, but that the representation could definitely have been broader and could definitely have included more types of women's bodies or Black women's bodies who fall outside of the Eurocentric beauty standards and norms in our culture. So I know that was a lot of thoughts. I would love to hear what your thoughts are about this video. I tried to give sort of an objective point of view, but also like put in my different opinions about it. What do you think? I would love to hear your comments. And thanks for watching, and I will see you later.